really look forward to jumping into this with you. Make sure that you dive all the way into it. You're going to get a lot out of it. Soak it up. I look forward to this experience with you. You see that people now have, I think they're very fragile in their psychology, because there's certain, there's the spiritual side, the social side, but then there's the individual psychological dimension of faith. What do you see? Because I think one thing that's emerged in my experience through this whole project has literally almost seeing faith as a human need, food, water, love, shelter. But I'm seeing the need for faith because, as you said earlier, we're going to die.
Yeah.
We're mortal. And in a sense, the psychological aspect of the human experience is that we're orphans who don't know who our parents are, right? So there's got to be some role for faith here, especially in fragile times and psychologically fragile times. So how do you see the role of faith?
I would say to someone, if you know it's going to rain, do you get an umbrella? Mm-hmm. If you know it's going to be below 30 degrees, do you carry a coat with you? Why? Because you are anticipating something that you're pretty sure is going to happen. Mm. How sure are you that you're going to die? Not next week or the month after that, but how certain are you that at some point this human fleshly body is going to give way and you're going to die? And if a person says, I'm never going to die, well, they got bigger problems than anything I can help with. Mm-hmm. But most people would say, well, I know it's going to happen. It may be 50, 60, 70 years from now, but it's going to happen. If you prepare for a half of inch of rain, don't you think you might ought to prepare for something that you yourself admit is absolutely going to happen?
Right.
And if you don't believe that anything happens after you die, okay, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die.
Yeah.
But if you have even the slightest hint that there may be something beyond this physical life, and maybe you ought to think about preparing for it. And if you don't think there's anything, then explain to me why you would live righteously, morally, in any way. What would be the point? If you see money laying, on a counter and someone turns his head as the clerk, why don't you reach and grab it? Mm-hmm. Why not? Well, because it would be wrong. What made it wrong? You needed it. They don't need it. Take it. Why not? Well, if there's somebody that is in your way, and if you bumped them off, you'd be better off. Get rid of them. Well, that would be terrible. Well, who made it terrible? People can't answer those questions because you cannot take God and extract him out of society and culture and make sense of why we would ever behave in a thoughtful, kind, rational way. It makes no sense. We ought to act utterly out of our selfish desires. We ought to act completely in our self-interest unless we think somewhere there may be a God we're going to be accountable to, and that maybe he does know what we're doing. We don't want to be caught.
Yeah. Well, especially because you have such a strong life in politics. You're talking about moral values, and politics is applying these values to social functions. And one of I think the challenges that a lot of people are feeling, especially parents. I'm a parent. You obviously raised some very impressive children, I might say. And right now, I've seen all kinds of data about how a Christian household sends their kids off to college, and some alarming percentage of them lose their faith while they're at school because of the environments that are there. What advice would you have for them?
Don't spend hard-earned money sending your kid to a college that will destroy everything you've spent a lifetime trying to teach him. Mm. I can't understand why a parent would say, I'm going to write a check for $60,000 a year so my child can go and unravel everything that I've worked for the past 18 years to build into him in terms of convictions and character. That makes no sense to me. Some Christian kids can go to a secular university, even a very liberal one, and come out on the other side of that stronger in their faith because they already were equipped and they were prepared for the battle. But if your child is not prepared for that battle and are easily swayed, rescue them from that environment. And I'm not saying send them to a monastery or a convent, but put them in a place where that they will grow not only academically, but where they'll grow spiritually. I think we have some great Christian universities. I feel like I went to one. And it was such a blessing. And I'm better prepared, not just for being able to explain my faith, but I've stood on the stage and debated graduates of Harvard Law and Yale Law and some of the finest universities in the world. I never felt disadvantaged academically, but I felt advantaged spiritually because there was a perception and depth of my worldview that many of them did not have, because theirs was limited to the five senses. They had no understanding of something bigger than themselves. That's where I think a Christian university and a Christian education is actually capable of better preparing a person for life.
Yeah, and I think that seems to be kind of a meme that's out in the world, that it's mutually exclusive to have high standard academics, and have high level spirituality in the same place. It's like you can't deliver great academic education in the face of of high spirituality. So I think what you're saying is true. And what I've noticed in this project, dealing with a lot of the apologists that it's in the Christian world, that these are extraordinarily brilliant scholars who have studied at very prestigious universities and have created literally the logic and the rationale for their Christian faith in profound ways. So what I started to see is strong spirituality matched to great academic rigor integrated, as compared to saying they had to be split apart. So with this, one of the things that I've concluded is that I think the brand Christianity is misguided in the outside world, not within the Christian world, but outside the Christian world. What people see is blind faith. You got to check your rational mind at the door if you're going to accept all these types of things, etc. But there is an academic side to Christianity that's profoundly rational.
You don't have to commit intellectual suicide to follow Christ. In fact, I think you really have to put aside a big portion of your brain to not accept the rational, archaeological, historical claims of a resurrected Christ.
Right.
And some of the greatest scholars of all time have sought to prove that Jesus was a fraud.
Right.
And inevitably, if they approach this with a real intellectual honesty, they end up saying, "My Lord and my God," because they can't argue the evidence. Again, looking at it from an archaeological or historical perspective, it's just remarkable. And there are more tangible reasons for us to believe in the Gospels than there are for us to believe that the moonshot in 1969 really did happen on the moon and not some remote desert in Arizona.
Right. So with that, you have been to Israel many times.
Lost track of how many,
So what keeps you going back?
First time I went to Israel was 1973, and it was part of a larger trip that a friend of mine and I were making as recent high school graduates. I was very poor as a kid, and I could never have afforded to go, but he was very wealthy. This was a Prince and the Pauper story. And he wanted to go to the Middle East and take this trip after graduation. And his dad said, "Well, I'm not going to let you go over there by yourself, but I tell you what, if Mike Huckabee goes with you, I'll pay his way, and I'll let both you guys go." And somehow his dad trusted me, I think, more than he did his own son. So we went. We went to Jordan. We went to Syria. We went to Lebanon. We were in Turkey and Greece. We were all over the Middle East. And one of the stops that we made was Israel. And I'm 17. This was 3 months before the Yom Kippur War. But we get there, and Israel in 1973 was a sleepy little country. There wasn't a whole lot going on. A little bit of tourism, selling a few oranges, doing their best to keep themselves from being annihilated by the enemies who surrounded them.
Right.
I didn't know a whole lot about the big picture of the Middle East. But something happened when I got to Israel. I can't explain it other than to say, here's a land I've never been to before, but I felt at home. Something about that whole experience was as clear as dialing in the frequency of a radio station and getting a perfect signal. And I counted unto bearing witness with my spirit. But I knew that this is God's land, and there's something really special. And that was the first of what has become now numerous trips. 1981, I started bringing groups of people to Israel. And then throughout the 80s and 90s, I would continue to do that. I took a period of time when I didn't get to take trips and go because I was in office as governor, and it's a little awkward to try to do that.
Right.
But after I left office, then I started back taking groups, and then I started going making speeches and doing various business opportunities there. And the one thing that has been consistent in all my trips to Israel is I never exhaust the extraordinary learning. People ask me, how come you keep going? I mean, you've been so many times. I said, because every time I go, I learn something that I didn't know. I'm refreshed spiritually because I feel like that, as Forrest Gump so wonderfully said, that deep theologian Forrest Gump, God shows up,
Right.
and he does. And I get on the airplane to come home already trying to figure out when's my next time to come back, and just never tire of it because of what for me is an incredibly spiritual connection, being where the Bible comes alive.
That's it for this particular interview. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to take this ongoing journey with you as we keep bringing more content. If you haven't already, you really should subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of phenomenal content coming down the road into the future that you'll want to know about. Leave a comment down here. I think people would love to hear from you, and then you can hear from them too. If you liked it, go ahead and give a like. It only takes half a second, and share this with people that you care about. The world needs more light in it right now. So thanks for being with me. Hope to connect with you again soon.